start our after our break off with the home opportunities module experiment and local wood products. And our folks on this today are going to be TJ, who is the North Zone Subculturist here at Sitka, and Eric, who's our district ranger on the Tongass for Sitka, and Andrew Thoms, who's the executive director of Sitka Conservation Society. So if you guys would come on up and have at it. And Eric's probably got some good stuff too, so. Okay, I don't do that. You're all right. Yeah. And let's.
Okay, hi, everybody. I'm Andrew Thoms. I'm Director of Conservation Society. We've been in existence here in Sitka since 1967, and we work across all of Southeast Alaska, working to protect the natural environment of the Tongass and support the development of sustainable communities. Personally, I've been working on Tongass timber issues for 20 years. I was a member of the Tongass Advisory Committee and working on Tongass transition to young growth projects across the board, both from at the mill level and timber sale level up through the policy level and how all those pieces come together. And this project is part of that trajectory work.
Hi, everybody. My name is TJ Witherspoon. I'm the North Zone Silviculturist. I've been in existence in Sitka since 2014. Before that, I was in Michigan, went to school at Michigan Tech, up in Houghton, Keweenaw Peninsula, and been here for 10 years now. And my role in this project, I'll talk a little bit about it in the middle of the presentation, but I'm excited to present about this like a year from now, because I think my role will come into play pretty heavy at the back end. We're still kind of in the first part of it.
Afternoon, everyone. My name is Eric Garner, and I'm as the district ranger here for the Thomas National Forest, and some other hats that I wear. I'm a local SAF member with this great crew here today, and I'm also second-time member of the Capitol Christmas Tree team. Just got roped into that.
We have a chair. We have a chair.
Yes. So anyway, just excited to be here today, and the home project, it hits home for a lot of us, and it's not just here in Sitka, which is a very challenging place to find available housing. But it's an issue and a crisis across the country. So we're excited to talk to you today. I'm excited to partner with you. You heard the pedigree we have up here with Andrew and the work that he's done. And we decided to go along for a ride, a fun ride of like, hey, let's throw young growth into the mix and see if we can do this, look at how we can model some of these opportunities for housing. So with that, I'll get started, and then the team they'll get you rolling. These are just some of the team members that are a part of the group, and there was a lot less a few months ago, and they've been growing. And we also have a lot of different folks that are a part of this throughout the communities adjacent to the Sitka Ranger District. And some of them you'll be hearing from today, some of the loggers and builders and other people in the community that we're collaborating with, who are also part of this, the City of Sitka Land Trust and other folks. Randy Huey, who's just an amazing person, is a big contributor of a part of this as well. And those are some of the names. You may know some of them. We've got Eden Rural Development, and of course, Andrew and Taylor from Sitka Conservation Society are also a big players and a part of that. And then also again, TJ over here. Oh yeah, I have to mention Amanda, always have to Cochran as well. Kind of just a quick background. This is kind of prefaced off of our national strategies. I am on the National Housing Solution team. Got in trouble for being creative with some housing opportunities because my moral compass just couldn't restrictions that we had. At the time, we were kind of leftovers, vestiges from prior administrations where we're kind of downsizing opportunities for housing. And so now we're kind of back on the upswing of creativity and innovation of how we can accommodate that. So somehow I'm in trouble to get thrown on the national team. And so, but they liked what they were hearing. And so some of the big keys and goals for that national team is to look at preserve and sustain sufficient inventory of housing. What do we have? Increase attainable housing opportunities. And that means that diversifying, those based upon economics, the size of your family, the areas, all those fun things. And then goal 3 is to identify those funding sources to support housing priorities.
And I'll just note, just some background here in Sitka, our housing is terrible. Our medium home price is probably 480, 500,000, and it's similar in communities throughout Southeast Alaska. So we can't house a workforce.
Yeah, that's a great preface too, just to kind of, we have, Region 10 has, one of the, if not the highest acclimation rates in the country, and the Tongass is the biggest driver in that, right? And that means that we go through all this, our workforce, go through all the interviews, and then the smarter ones do their homework, and they're like, no, we cannot afford to come there, right? And so that's a biggie. Thank you, Andrew, and it's not just us, it's our colleagues, it's our partners, it's our communities. And so we wanted to kind of make sure that we were aligning our apprentices and our primary goals along with similar to what you saw with the national strategy, and that's provide applicable data of inventories of properties, existing infrastructure, resources, partners, funding policies for potential housing utilization, collaborative opportunities. That's where SES is helping us out a ton with our communities and partners to explore and incorporate sustainable young growth timber, resource management into viable housing options. And then number 3 is provide the Tongass National Forest, the region, and the Forest Service nationally, along with our communities, a one-stop venue for diverse and equitable housing examples and options, so that folks could kind of get an idea of a way to try to incorporate this strategy that we're looking at. And we're kind of doing it to where we're checking out a few different options. We're going to flesh those out a little bit, but we're going to look at the one that we're going to go in a little bit more for Sitka. But that might not be the exact fit for the next community. It's a good bonus for that. All right, and again, these are, it's a wonderful time. I used to get in trouble a lot back in the day doing collaboration. I'm like, Garner, what are you doing pulling scabs off of old wounds, and it's so cool. It's our MO now, right? That's how we operate now, right? So it's a wonderful time here towards the latter part of my career to be able to do these cool things. And so these are our this is our national agency strategies, and this is taken straight from those, and that's develop collaborative strategies with communities to jointly identify and invest in conservation easements, public land acquisitions, shared stewardship, and other means of protecting the most environmentally and socially important lands. Promote and develop markets for sustainably grown wood products, particularly for low-value timber for use as green building material, and create jobs and opportunities for local communities to sustainably produce and use wood products and provide contracting opportunities in communities and small businesses. So that's what we do, and that's why it's really pertinent to all these folks here in the room. And I'm just about, I think this might be my last slide, but this is how we're doing it. This is that we're establishing these working groups as so through the collaborative with this team helping out. Is we're looking at those subject matter experts, both in our agency, in the communities, other groups, other partners, and we're kind of putting them into some of these different teams, and so these working groups. And so we kind of have an umbrella, and I'm just going to hit some of these 3 main umbrellas, but there's other groups that are kind of, coming off, subgroups coming off of those main umbrellas, and that's designers, millers, builders, and subject matter experts. And then it's the property, real estate, fed, state, and local housing folks, and then how do we fund this stuff? What is the fiscal budget, fed, state, and local grants, agreements, opportunities to fund these innovative strategies they're looking at? And that might be my last slide. I'm going to hand it over to Andrew.
Okay, thanks, Eric. So on this project, our interest is in having homes in Sitka for the people who need to live here, especially for Forest Service employees that manage our resource. The Forest Service has 3 or 4 or 5 buildable lots that are empty. And for us, there needs to be houses on those. So we want to figure out how do we put houses on those, and we want to build those with local resources from our forests. So that's the primary objective of what we're trying to figure out. I'm going to go through here how we're going to do that work, because we're going to look at it from the forest management side up through the build, and then how we put it all together. So I'm going to go through each one of these. The first step in it, and I'll pass this over to TJ. We're going to look at what timberlands we have on the Sitka Ranger District that are our long-term timber supply, our timber breadbasket. When Delilah talked about the suitable land base, what we're gonna look at is what's the operable land base where it makes the most sense to do rotational forestry, where the infrastructure mix fits with what's on the ground there that grows trees. And pass it over to TJ to talk a little bit about that.
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, so we've been working together for quite a few months now, having meetings and you know, to tie it kind of into our like past, present, and future idea. You know, up until this collaboration, I've been personally involved by living on some of our affordable housing opportunity up at the Forest Service Trailer Court. That's where some of our sites are that we'll hear about later. And in my 10 years on this district, we've done a lot of work on the Corner Bay Road system, which is going to be one of the primary sources of wood for these projects, for this district's projects. The idea being that this kind of like creates a roadmap that other districts and other places could use with their local wood and local operators. So yeah, we've been working, I don't know if Brian's still on, but Brian Kleinhens, he's involved too. He's gonna help us with some prioritization and modeling. We've got lots of timber for where the demand is now. But part of these conversations is making sure that we're implementing management that will set us up for the future too. So a lot of these conversations are like, yep, we're pretty good now. But we want to be able to support our local operators moving into the future. And I don't think I had anything else other than a shout out to Taylor, who's been a big help on this project as well. And sometimes we chat when these two are chatting and we're just like, it's like, yeah, mom and dad agreed. They got together today. So it's been really good. It's been a long time coming. And I'm excited, like I said, to report on this in the future, because my side of it will probably be a lot more on like sale prep and recon and finding those sites for our local crews to go out and get the material to do these projects.
Great. And in the photos here that I have on the slide, this is your typical young growth stand here. This is an area, where are we here? This is an area that was logged probably in the early 70s. It was thinned in around 1967 at $180 an acre. I found out about one of the thinners.
No.
97, it was thinned. It's probably the early 70s. It was logged. It's up St. John, Nacosina system. So that's our timber resource there. Thanks to the state, y'all are helping us contract Terra Verde, and we're using the inventory data from after the TAC and the new growth and yield model. And what we want to look at in these two basins that are part of SAF-FM, the Corner Bay and False Island, is how do we use the modeling that we can do now to figure out what's the sustained yield from those systems and a general rotation age to figure out what can we log out of those systems when we get to that sustained yield basis every year. And from there, start to figure out what kind of industry can we make out of that? What kind of products can we get from that system? So the first step is that analysis of on the ground and working with TJ and the silviculturalist and looking at, you know, in terms of this resource, what can we do with that? So that's the first objective. The second objective then is what's the local logging and milling capacity and types of timber products that can be desired by builders. And right now we're doing some of that. We're building with lumber that we source, and it's everything from beach salvage to small sales to select sales of old growth and young growth. And there's some examples of some different stuff around Sitka. We work at Sitka Conservation Society with the high school, and we have a revolving fund where we buy their materials and they build things with it. They're building these shed kits. And this is young growth Sitka spruce siding, framing material. Here's all the framing material in the high school. So the kids are learning to build. We're experimenting with the materials and we're ordering the product from the mills and starting to create the demand in the markets for them to be able to do something with it. And so here, that's what's right now. What can we develop out of that into the future so that we can be building with that, sourcing that lumber from here and figuring out what can we do with this resource that our forest can produce, at least here locally.
Hey, Andy.
Yeah.
Are you finishing those, the spruce, the young growth spruce?
I think she put shingle oil on, she called it, that
Is
one.
it sticking? I'm finding it's having our.
I don't know. Yeah, I haven't worked with that spruce exterior product yet, so I'm not sure on that one. Third objective is figuring out the transportation, and we've been transporting lumber from around the region, everything from fishing tenders to AML to ferries and putting trailers on and off it, and we're trying to crack the code of what's gonna work best and how to create the linkages between the communities where there's milling and then where there's demand. Here's an AML shipment from Tennecky. AML barge goes into Tennecky 3 times a year, twice a year. And so this was one of the shipments to the high school. And AML donated that, but then we start to figure out what works, what doesn't. And then it comes to what can we build with those materials? What works best? What's the product? And what do we do with it? So we're in the middle of that right now. Here's one of the designs that we're working with, and part of the agreement that we have in the funding from the Forest Service is to hire some designers and then some engineers to get some of these designs stamped by the engineers, so Forest Service can start building those and putting that together. We'll be using what Matt talked about, the grade stamping, and using those provisions to try to work with that and put some of that to work. And here's just some examples. This is a house across the road from mine. That's similar to my house. This was built in 19, sort of Sitka spruce and then Sitka spruce sheathing. Here's the inside of part of my house where I replicated that same building style with materials that I sourced. This is young growth spruce framing. That's from the Winter Harbor project that y'all did down on Prince of Wales that I was able to get my hands on some of that. So we can build with this stuff. Don't tell the building inspector, because I did build with that. It's not grade stamped and it's working fine. The house isn't falling in. So this stuff works, and we can build with it. We just have to figure out how to make it economical, how to get the builders to mill it, and how to get the millers to put it all together and make those connections. Next, we want to build a prototype structure. With that, we want to build a house for one of the lots on the Forest Service and provide housing, especially for the seasonal employees that often that's their first job. We have a good place for them to live and they like it here. They're going to stay and move up the career ladder. So we want to do that. This is a tiny home that we built with the high school a couple years ago. It's on a trailer. We'll never do one of those again. I would not recommend doing that. But this project worked out good, and we have lumber from all over the Tongass in that one and sourced it from all over the place and figured out how to use it.
Why didn't you like the project?
What?
Why won't you do it again?
Building it on the trailer is a pain in the butt. These houses are way too small. Like, yeah, they might work for some people for a little while and then they'll get tired of that. For a seasonal employee, it would work, but building it on the trailer was really hard. As an educational tool also, the sheds work way better because it's a more simple framing and learning the skills. The tiny home, was a lot of really intricate stuff that wasn't conducive to high schoolers.
Yeah.
But we got it done, and this is over in Juneau being used. We sold this and that money went back into the program, and we're buying more materials with it. I think we sold in 2020. Everybody had their masks on. And then here's some of the Forest Service administrative lots that we need to figure out. How do we put a house on there? What's the structure for who owns the house? That's really difficult within the Forest Service because Forest Service doesn't want to be the landlord. But how do you have a house on there that somebody can live in and meet the different rules, or who manages it? So that's a big hurdle that we're trying to figure out and work through that while we're doing all these other things. And then if we can figure all of that out, then we'll have opportunities to share this with other Forest Service districts and places across the country. We'll have identified the obstacles and look for the opportunities. Sure, I pulled out of the files of our second Young Growth Symposium. I think we were out in Edna Bay and Kosciuszko and out in that area. And we had Senator Murkowski's staff, staff from all the state land ownerships, mental health university. Chris is there as a state forester. And this symposium, we went out and looked at things on the ground. We looked at project examples, and this wasn't a symposium where we're all in like we are here giving presentations. We spent all the time in the field and seeing what worked, what didn't, how to put things together. And so with this project, how can we share what we learned with all the people who are involved, and then develop the policy and put pieces together so we can move some of these ideas forward. And that's all we have. So, big goals, here's our land base, here's our timber resource, how do we use that? What can we do with it? What's a building style that fits with our climate and the resource? And how do we start to create economic opportunities there and house our people in the community?
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. And just want to kind of also mention too, just on the uniqueness of this is that one of the property avenues that we're looking at is the farm bill. And that affords us to be able to use our one of our administrative sites with our partners in our communities, right? And they can even do a special use permit. The farm bill has bipartisan support. Right now, Senator Murkowski is really advocating for it as well. And that would extend that to a 99-year lease, right? And you can imagine for investors, for other people, that kind of takes that down. And we're looking at that availability of diversity, like we were talking about later on, is, you know, it's seasonals, but it could be, it's not just tiny homes, it's smaller homes to decent sized homes that we're looking at in the future. And again, not, you know, it's starting off with us with what we have, but we really definitely want to make sure that we're working with our partners in our communities to expand those opportunities.
Yeah, and I think this home design that we have here, this is a 20 by 20 by 24 foot design. So not the tiny homes on trailers, but a modest size that can fit a pair of people that are seasonals or a family and be comfortable.
Question for you. Andrew, you mentioned the average cost of a home here, and this is kind of two parts. I'm curious what percentage of that is the land value and how much buildable land do you have in town? Is that a constraint?
Yeah, we have almost no buildable land in town, and you know, you'll hear people scapegoat that, oh, the government needs to give up land, Forest Service needs to just give land and we'll have housing. We don't even have flat ground to build on, or that it's not in a landslide zone. It's about 250,000 to develop a lot with utilities, rock, and putting everything together, and then about $375 a square foot for construction. So you can work some of those costs and, you know, find some shortcuts, but, you know, generally
Land's a big piece of it.
land is the piece of it, which is why Forest Service does have these administrative lots that we can put something on. We need to have houses on those.
So that creates a little bit of a demand for products right off, but what's the plan beyond that? Like when these mill operators start providing products, what's the next step for them?
Yeah, what, the question was, this is the initial demand and then what comes after that. So with the groups that we're working with, we've been polling the construction workers, the contractors in town and the business owners and figuring out, would you purchase local lumber? What are the obstacles to that? What are the products you need? You know, how does that all work out? And we've gotten some really good answers on that and figured out what are those obstacles and opportunities. The milling capacity in Southeast Alaska is, you know, tepid, and it's difficult to buy materials from a local mill. So a lot of this is, and what we found in sourcing materials for the last 15 years, when we can start purchase and putting that flywheel together, our purchase will get piggybacked on from other purchasers and bring the cost down. People will see the product and want that. People will replicate that building style. Builders will have the contacts with millers and start purchasing it on their own. What I'm looking at more and more is that the framing material from local products is gonna be difficult, but there's more value-added materials that we might be able to do. Exposed beams, interior siding, finish work. You can frame with it, it works really well, but for the builders, they need that consistent product. They need dimensional lumber because that's what's gonna fit with the windows, the insulation sizing, all of the other products that you get when you build a house. Unless you've got somebody that wants to build more of a custom house. But if you got a builder who's in the business of just putting together a house as quick as they can and following plans, they're probably gonna buy dimensional lumber from the lower 48. But I think, Jeremy, what it really is here's our resource. What can we do with it? And what are the niches that we can get into? How are we supporting the mills and figuring out what those niches are and then occupying those long term?
No, and I like with local agriculture, that's kind of a big thing. I'm sure it's down here. It certainly is in the interior, and this almost fits under that, right? Like, I do think that probably there's people out there that will pay a little bit more of a premium for a locally produced product.
Yes.
And so like getting a communication plan, like what you know, so the structures that you're building and then use it as a demonstration for like what could be made.
Yeah, and you know, as Sheila can tell you, our demand here in the Sitka Ranger District in the Northern Tongass for timber is really low. And our supply right now is not that big, but we will have that wall of wood coming on soon. So what we're doing now is getting us through the next decade, 2 decades. And then in 20 years, we don't know what the economic situation is. We don't know what the demand is gonna be. We don't know what markets are gonna look like. So a lot of what we're doing now is how we work through this transition phase. And we need to have the capacity on the ground to do the milling, the work in the woods. We need the Forest Service to have the capacity to put together sales. We need to do the land management. So we need to have successful timber sales. We need local consumption of the product. We need the skills and abilities. And we've got to keep that alive. And we got to recruit the next generation of people who are out there doing that work in the forest, in all forest management, woodworking, construction, and all of those elements. So, you know, even though we're not the big solution or the big problem across the whole Tongass in timber, this is a way of starting to figure out how do we get through that process and put these things together and, you know, start using what we produce for what we need to build and work with.
Yeah, and I would just say too, I mean, that's a great question, is that when I've given this presentation when I was in co-op places, you're exactly right. You know, some of them call it the regenerative, you know, model of utilizing your wood here instead. I mean, you can imagine your carbon footprint of sending stuff elsewhere and then bringing up here. People are really excited about. Alaskans are very prideful, and so yeah, same here. Is there's a lot of people really excited to see, you know, the opportunity to have this on the market as well. So. Oh, and the last thing too is, yeah, you're right. We're on the marketing strategy. There's a slide we kind of limited on to make sure we had enough time, but that was one of them, is have that comms plan fleshed out as we move along. That's one of the stages. And we've kind of been doing that internally. Our chief knows about this project. He's really excited. Actually had to help one of the deputy chiefs put together a briefing paper. She took it on a national tour, highlighting one of our uniqueness of our project as well. So we're doing that internal and we're doing the external. And I don't know if Andrew Taylor knows, I just met with John Leach in the city earlier in the week, and we're helping put a little pressure on the WO. They may be helping us get a property ACES retiree to help us out with our property management stuff. Because you know we're struggling there, because again, there's only 2 forests in the entire country that are using the Farm Bill to look at these opportunities. So we're getting there.
Yeah, so I'm gonna go back to the question about spruce, and the only reason I'm asking this is because I did a tour on Prince of Wales and talked to some of the mill operators. And they said one of the things that they're really coming across with young growth spruce is that it won't hold any treatment. Hemlock does, but spruce won't. And then just last weekend, I pulled out my, I got a big young growth cookie from Eric Nichols, and I had treated it and I pulled it out last weekend and it looks terrible.
Huh.
And so it's just something to keep in mind. And so, like, for example, Viking has said if they go into a young growth transition, that the spruce is just gonna be peeled and that they will save their hemlock for actual, having treatment on it.
Yeah.
So just, I mean, I would be something to watch for sure.
Yeah, thanks. We'll experiment with that and figure out what that is, but this is the stuff we need to do so that we can figure this stuff out so that we know.
There's a lot of, there's a lot of wood out there to experiment with.
Yeah.
It's expensive, but.
There's a bunch online too.
Okay, that's good. Right here.
This might be premature, but the picture you showed of the subject stand looked like it was A-frame guarded and logged off. The first picture looked like it was logged off. There you go, yeah. That's
Yeah.
right.
There's a road that goes along right here, and it was cable yarded down to that road right there.
So as you imagine supplying this material and logging systems have changed since that was cut, are you constrained by the footprint of the previous harvest, or could you include the other of that picture as to make it a different attraction for somebody that's willing to invest to go get those logs off the hillside?
I think that so this area, probably the reality is, we're not gonna go back there because there's a half-mile wide landslide and 10 miles of road to get up there.
Just operationally, are you constrained to the footprint of the previous harvest unit, or do you have the flexibility to adapt to changes in technology that might have happened since that was cut?
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, do we have millions of dollars to put more roads in to
No,
access the areas and, yeah.
There's guys that would put it, ground-based, there's guys that would log that off the ground with a, sitting in a cab. And
So are you asking if we would use the same logging system or
no,
the
I'm
same
asking you,
footprint?
does your effort to provide material from second growth forests constrain you from working in the footprint that gives you the second growth forest, or can you bump that out and say, here's other products too that you could have attraction for?
So older.
Are you constrained to the footprint of what was logged before in this enterprise?
If we can access it, on our district, what was logged was what was easiest to log, and they moved on from here in the early nineties because they logged it all what was economical to get. So we've got small sales of old growth that are 50,000 board feet and under. And there's some of that around, but honestly, we got most of the stuff that you can get. And I think that what's left is just cost prohibitive to get out, and even the young growth. Unless we are really creative, like they talked about in the H.O.M.E project, about keeping our road systems open and figuring out where there's integration between subsistence access, recreation access, other permitted uses, cabins, and being really creative and getting that up there. It's gonna be hard for us to keep the road systems open and to do long-term management and forestry in these areas because we're all on islands, it's saltwater and far from markets.
But I get to go back to like the actual, like, yes, we can cut some old growth every year.
I don't care if it's old growth or middle growth or whatever. Do you have the latitude to change the boundary of the unit that gives you the?
Okay. If you go outside the boundary of the young growth, you are in old growth. That's just what it is on the top.
Picture there, you see.
Yeah, it's young
Maybe
growth
you're
or
asking
old growth.
Paul. That young girl stand, you see that picture there,
Right.
that's been typed, retyped probably since it was cut into multiple stands. So, yeah, we have the flexibility to divide that young growth stand up into
Yeah.
logical units or settings or different stands to manage it in a way that it fits with site productivity and other things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and actually, the work that the state is supporting with Terra Verde is to look at the analysis of those different units, the logging systems that would be used, and to model the different road systems and which ones make the most sense to keep open that access the greatest volume over time, and the units that have the highest growth rates based on the inventory that was taken there before. So we gotta figure all that out.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was the question online?
I had a question online.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm working on some work on the Kenai Peninsula with Sitka spruce and local milling. And I've been advised by some folks that if you don't kiln dry the wood, anything you build is gonna twist and crook. And I was wondering if the local suppliers you're doing, if these are kiln dried or air dried, or what kind of processes they're using, and how, if you've experienced any of that twisting or bucking of wood.
All the stuff that we've been sourcing for the high school has been air dried, and it's all behaved pretty good. There's defect and there's definitely material that, gets culled. With the siding that we did, with the beveled siding with young growth spruce, there's been a lot of that because you're cutting a thin material for that purpose, and so a bunch of it's split. And but the framing material that we use that was air dried, we've had really good luck with that. We haven't experienced that.
I got one question.
So we've got 5 more minutes. We've got time for another question or two if we have any. If not, yeah, we can.
Yeah, I was just gonna mention too, yeah, I mean, we're exploring and looking too, I mean, this is new, I love how many questions there were, right? I think there were a lot, so there's a lot, sometimes more questions than answers. But I'm really grateful to Andrew and Taylor and the team because they're embarking onto the unknown it's challenging and I've grown a lot and I really appreciate, the openness for us to learn. And so I'm excited as well, to move forward. And then if you guys don't have any more questions, I have one question for you guys.
One quick
Go ahead.
question. Back to Nathan's question. Are there any kilns down here that you could experiment with?
Yeah, there's a container kiln in town that we did a bunch of work with alder and old growth cedar, and I think some people are kilning spruce down on Prince of Wales. Sheila, do you know?
Yeah, there's a guy there is some kilns, but as to whether they're 100% operational all the time is not.
I guess I would say, for that, what's come up in the discussion, both on those characteristics of spruce and being kilned and the material sticking to it. I'll make a plug back to the agency for the wood products lab that we used to have here in Sitka and thinking about doing some of those experiments on it. We did experiments in Ketchikan on the strength of the spruce that we get from the Tongass and had some really good findings. These are the kind of things that I think we should be looking at, and especially as we're starting to experiment, look at these products, ask these questions and figure this out. That's where we need that wood products lab doing some of that work and doing some of that experiment so that we can do this planning with more robust support from those specialists.
Yeah, and there has been interest in the small operators on Prince of Wales co-oping kind of a kiln, getting one kiln and all the operators can kind of pay into it, right? Michael, have you heard that discussed? Yeah.
Well, and JK Ford product has been working on it.
Okay. Big Hole does not.
Garner, what's the one? Is that person? Tyler Street still has one in H.O.M.E, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I do know that some of the local loggers, they are looking and are, trying to go through funding opportunities for, getting their equipment, their gear stirred up. So they are applying for grants and funding and opportunities to move towards that young growth model of how they can better, get the equipment to better utilize that wood as well.